Hi, I'm Danger Dan Jers, the host and GM of the D&D Real Play podcast, D&D Dark. Join us on Wednesdays for an absurd, over-the-top comedy horror adventure, starring some of history's most infamous monsters.
I'm Ben Magna. I play Mary Frankenstein, our barbarian.
I am Daniel Cruz. I am playing Imhotep the Mummy, our cleric.
I'm Jordan, and I play Larry Talbot, a lycanthropic warlock.
I am Grayson, playing Jet Griffin, the Invisible Man, the party's rogue.
I am Aaron. I play the Phantom of the Opera, our bard.
For more information, go to dndarkpodcast.com and listen to us anywhere you find podcasts.
Let's go. Master of all things tabletop. With the Paladins of Podcast. They ruin the games you love by talking rules that suck, how to build kick-ass encounters, destroy worlds, and really get your players invested. So go ahead and throw that fistful of dice at someone. Because we're going on a side quest.
Yeah. Hi, Rob. How are you doing today? Is that Eli?
You're going to trip me up with that every time. Every time. Despite my surgery last week, I am doing okay.
That's good.
Yourself?
And I heard you're still running games, right?
Yeah, that I am. I was able to still have a game Saturday that I'd like to talk about a little later in the episode.
Well, we'll talk about that later then. My game is going pretty great. I have ran into a situation where, I have a great set of players in that I feel like I don't really have to do much and they will challenge themselves. And it just works out. It's just a great group of players. There's a situation where they're in a they're in a lava tube. They're underground. They're in a lava tube. Mm-hmm. The lava tube is kind of cracking down below, falls into a chasm, and from the side of the parties, the opposite side of the lava tube from where the party started, there's like a rope going down. And the party managed to both split themselves in different sections of this lava tube, with parts of the lava tube collapsing, and split themselves in the lava tube and in the chamber below, and then they started pulling up the ropes. So they've basically managed to cut themselves off in 3 different ways, and all of them are in dangerous positions. And because they're all kind of in this dark area, they're trying to hunt a monster that's in these abandoned mines. And so there's the danger of that, and they don't want to make too much noise, so they're not actually communicating between all the different groups, and they all have different manners to try to save their situation. I'm very excited. Makes it easy for me.
I've got some questions, and this really comes down to, I think, a little bit of DM style. We mentioned that there was a cave-in the lava tube.
Oh yeah, so the lava tube, there are several holes in it, and basically the rock's thin. Heavy weight over it will cause cracks. You could fall through.
So it was planned to happen if conditions were met, but not improvised.
Yep. I had created the lava tube. I was like, you know what? This is a lava tube over a cavern. Too much weight will cause it to crack. And I
like that.
I didn't plan for it to crack. I didn't necessarily want it. I didn't have anything that would cause it to crack. Just if the players put enough weight,
which they did.
Which they did. They had 3 of their heaviest party members moving in a clump, and 2 were party members, and 1 was a poor NPC. And
it happens. So as they're in this dark tube, again, Hackmaster, I'm not as familiar with. which I'm hoping to change once I get my second player's handbook and dungeon master guide, by the way. Excited for those. Anyhow, are there options for characters such as low light vision or dark vision that are common in the Dungeons and Dragons Pathfinder games?
So it's a little interesting in that there's no dark vision, at least for player characters. So player characters can have normal vision or low light. So they always need at least some light to be able to see.
Mm-hmm.
So when they had the lava tube crack, it was actually their torchbearer was the only one that fell, and
of course,
so they were completely plunged into darkness, which was interesting to see play out at the table as well. It helped add to some of the chaos of the situation.
Of course. So then, as they separated themselves in 3 different scenarios and 2 different planes, you said they had the horizontal and the vertical.
Yep.
They knew to at least some degree that part of their party was down below. Why did they pull ropes up, separating their party further? Why'd they make it more complicated?
So they're following these dwarven miners who had left a rope to get down because they were exploring these old mines. And so basically the party's crossing this bridge. It starts to crack. That separates the party in half. The party that's on the side of the knotted rope, one of the characters was like, I'm going down the rope. I'm going to, like... Meanwhile, while they're going down the rope, the party in the tube was like, hey, we need to connect, and we need that knotted rope on our side to climb down. Can you toss it to us? And so the first player that was climbing down the rope got to the bottom, and then the person at the top started pulling it up. And the person at the bottom was like, hey, wait. Oh, no, I don't want to yell. I don't want to make too much noise. So they just were like, uh-oh.
I gotta trust they know what's going on.
I guess I got no rope now.
Wow. So how far was the bridge that they had to try to get the rope across?
I think it's about a 60-foot section of tunnel that has the cracks in it. I'm not looking at my campaign right now, but
that's all right. These are like those weird technical questions, because one of my biggest curiosities here is how were they able to get the rope across? I mean, does the character have a fly ability? I know that Hackmasters, especially in your world, is generally lower magic than high fantasy. So I don't expect everybody to be teaming with wings and infinite flight and maneuverability.
Oh, it's tough. I've managed to accidentally identify the biggest weakness of my player group, and that's climbing. And apparently this is just they have knotted ropes, which is the easiest climb check you can make, but it's more about the weird situation they're in. They don't really have magic to deal with this because both of their mages are training at the moment.
Okay.
So
are these their proteges?
There's a mix of them in this situation. So it's kind of
awesome.
This is actually we're in an all protege. It's a protege adventure.
So their proteges. I love the fact that proteges might die and their masters are gonna be like, ah, shit, I don't know where that guy went. He just flaked out of work. What a jerk.
Well, we started doing the math, and there's one player that has really bad odds on their proteges. They have the most protege deaths of anyone. Enough so that
how does he keep getting more?
Yeah. We started we started one of our warm-up sessions with some of the players, some of the players' characters kind of making a bet on how long this other player's proteges are going to last.
That sounds like it'd be perfect role play fodder for other players in the party, because you imagine like, well, we're not sure how long you're going to last, man. You're going to handle our less valuable equipment, the stuff that we can replace whenever.
Oh man, The last time they got like 2 nice items, they gave it to one of the protege members of the party.
Mhm.
And then the protege went off because the main character went back. And then the party's like, oh man, what happened to those 2 items? They're like, oh shoot, we gave it to the protege.
Shit. That's funny.
I was the most bummed out about that. I was like, these items are so cool.
Right? Man, I get that. Now, when you do your proteges, do you allow your players to create them, or do you decide to create your players' proteges?
I've seen a variety of people do a variety of methods, but for me, I let the players do it.
Okay.
The whole idea of proteges is having like a pool of choices for that. If your main character dies, you get to choose your next character to play, and so you kind of want it to be all characters. Like, I mean, the whole concept of building a character is you get invested in the character. So,
yep,
I do know some people that'll build proteges for their players. I'm not a fan.
Not your thing. So I've introduced the protege idea to both my parties, and I've determined I'm going to build their level 1 proteges for them. Like, they don't determine who's going to come work for them. I determine who's going to come work for them. They haven't gotten them yet. I figured they'll get them around level 7.
So I like that to a certain extent, but can I ask you a question? How familiar are your players with the rules just in general for your game?
Enough per character that they would fumble through it regardless. And I say that because my players tend to they don't really write down any information that's relevant. A lot of times they'll look at their character sheet, they stick to a semi-small formula, they don't branch out from that, and then they forget certain abilities, certain features, what they do, etc. So what I would end up doing is making sure that their level 1 character has all of their abilities, features, etc. printed out right there, so they can look at one sheet, see everything that does what.
I'm of the opinion that the more characters my players make, the more familiar they are going to be with all the game rules and all the different varieties. You know, even if they're playing a fighter now, if they just had to build a wizard, they had to read through all the wizard's abilities. I think it helps like improve like rules comprehension at your table.
I agree, and I like that idea, which is why I building a level 1 character, I'm really not building too much. Like, there are certain things in my world that are static for players. You know, they're getting max hit points, stats, race, etc. Those things are all customizable choices. Some of them play into what feats they get, etc. So I'm literally just laying the groundwork of this apprentice. Essentially, they'll be the ones who are able to level them up. They'll choose what route they go as they level. It's just, I find that if I give them free reign to pick, they pick within the same small pool that they always pick, and I'd like them to experience other things.
I can totally see it from that perspective. That does make a lot of sense. You kind of want to coerce the players into trying something different. How are you going to introduce your like, are you going to try to do protege adventures? Or how are you going to try to, like, how are you building that in if D&D or Pathfinder doesn't have training times?
Well, I'm familiar with character trees. So generally what I'll do is with a character tree, when they're at a large port, city, civilization, when they're in civilization, by any degree that's bigger than small. Excuse me. I give them the opportunity to switch out for another character that they have in their character tree. Magically, these people are always just in the same town together. I mean, technically, it's a massive party, but only certain ones go on actual jobs. And then while they're on an active mission, they can't randomly switch out. They have to go back to a point of origin or civilization, a civilized establishment. On the term of protege, they will only level up when they gain experience from being on adventures and missions, etc. And it's really just a pause on this character. Like, this doesn't sound like something my character would waste their time with. I will send my protege. That's my hope. I don't know how the players are going to utilize it, but I'm going to try to frame it so that sounds like a very reasonable option for them all to choose on their own.
Yeah, I've thought about running something situation like or something similar like that, where it's more like you have a character pool, but I've never gotten around to trying it.
It can be a little intense or different depending on how you really work it. I know that the most I'll ever go is 3. They can have 3 characters total. Essentially, their primary character, 2 backup characters that they can swap out whenever. I would always allow their 2 secondary characters to level up with their primary character. So that way, I didn't have a mixed party full of 12 to 2, which can be really devastating when that level 2 guy walks into a den of giant scorpions.
I think there's a big I think some systems work really well with mixed levels. I think Hackmaster does a great job. Like the hit points difference between a first level and a 5th level character isn't enormous. Like in the sense that you already start with 20 health about as a Hackmaster first level character, so it's survivable in higher level party situations. I mean, Pathfinder and D&D, that's too high of a CR will just butcher you. Everything scales.
Right. And we talked about that CR issue. I mean, that's, oh man, yeah. So, like I said, I've run the character trees. I've let my players build their characters, and the reason I've determined I'm going to build a level 1 apprentice is because, well, level 1 protege is because the players that I've allowed character trees to do have literally created the same character 3 different times, 3 different names. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Why? Well, like, you're not taking an opportunity to branch out, explore, have a really good fucking time, and kick some ass, man.
Part of me loves that. Part of me absolutely loves that they just build the same character, because as an avid fan of like Knights of the Dinner Table, you know, when Knuckles the Third dies, one of his disciples, Knuckle the Eighth, will step up, and you know, you got to have all different iterations of your character, and I think if you leap into that aspect, I love it.
I think to a degree it's fun. Like if you were to build the same character as your primary character, and all of your previous same copy characters were part of the same clan, part of the same family line, the whole deal all the way down, I think that would be entertaining. But as a whole, 3 of the same exact copies in one game, where it's the master and his apprentices who are the exact same copies. At least I want them to branch out some. Yeah, it's fun, but I want some variance, because if I know what to expect too much, I will eventually develop a stale style myself, because they're going to know what to expect from me.
That's fair as well.
So, like that. Now, about this the rope and the 60-foot crossing.
Yeah.
Why did the party that needed the rope, did they have knotted rope of their own?
They had a sizable amount of rope, which we discovered that session, but it was not knotted.
Can't they knot it themselves?
Yes, they can, but I believe they had 100 feet of rope, but it was a 60-foot. I think it was a 60-foot situation. So, and knotting reduces the size by half.
Really?
Yeah, and
that stinks.
So it was just enough that it cut it to where there'd be like a 10-foot or a 15-foot gap. So they didn't quite have enough rope to do the entire thing. So they're like, let's just reuse that knotted rope.
I mean, I guess that makes sense. My initial thought was, why not knot the rope, climb down, walk across, keep the other knotted rope down, and climb back up. But you said the crux of the party was climb checks. So
yes,
excuse me. I mean, they were going to hit those climb checks either way.
Yeah, and so like having a knotted rope, like so in Hackmaster terms, D100 for skill checks. A knotted rope makes it an easy check, which is essentially you add 80, which on a D100 is a pretty sizable chunk.
Yeah.
And I think only just having rope is an average, so it's 40. So having a knotted rope basically makes it twice as easy to climb. And some of them haven't put many points in climb, so an average check might be 47% or somewhere in that realm.
And as I'm not familiar with the intricacies of the mechanics, I'm trying to relay this. Adding 80, so you have pretty much an 80% success chance.
Yeah, 80% plus whatever your skill is. So if you had a 20% skill and an easy, like a knotted rope, basically 100% chance of success. Well, there's a fumble mechanic, but 100, yeah.
So I mean, again, looking at a die 100. Every individual number is a single percentage. Add 80 to whatever your skill. I mean, you have to roll whatever your modifier is less than 20 to really risk failing at that point.
Yeah, you would have to be like wearing plate mail or something.
A lot of penalties, etc. Which, I mean, if you have heavy tanking kind of guys, they usually are wearing heavy armors of some sorts. And yeah, so I can see how penalties would stack up for sure. But again, I mean, like when you have an 80% success chance out the gate, it seems nearly impossible to fail.
You're right. That's what an easy check's for.
And yeah, wow, that's funny. I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, this situation is the rope itself very easy to climb, but the situation itself has just been made more dangerous by some of the party's actions. So,
absolutely. I think I told you about an instance in a game I ran with a young lady. She died 3 times in a single campaign because she couldn't make her reflex saves or her climb checks. Very similar instance. It just did not work out in her favor, and we just allowed her to change the name on her character sheet. Like she was just around the other corner every time.
Climbing was initially a huge problem for this party because they wouldn't ever check their knots.
Mm-hmm.
So in Hackmaster, tying a knot is a hidden roll by the GM. So
really,
but the GM will. So I roll, and the knot's tied. Is the knot tied well? Well, you
gotta
test
check.
It. And so you can either test it or you can just go for it. And so basically, if they say they check it, then it, as long as they've got enough time, basically they don't need to make a rope use check. But
okay.
For the longest time, they'd just be like, I'm tying a rope and I'm just going. And so they would tie a knot and then just go wild. And then one day, the worst part is we've been playing for a while and we've even had a climber in the party. And one day they were talking about climbing and they're like, man, I wish we could just like check our ropes to see if they were tied because this seems like a real big problem. And someone else was like, Eli, can we check our ropes? I was like, yes, you can. Like, oh my God, we're checking our ropes.
That's hilarious. I love that. Now, I also have to say that because it's a hidden roll by GM. Have you had a shenaniganizer who passes you a note at any degree, like, yo, anytime I tie a rope, I'm going to tie a slip knot. We'll just see how the party deals with this.
No, I haven't had anything like that happen yet.
It's a good thing. That's a good thing because I'd be that guy.
They try some like player action, but more often than not, they try to do it in a manner where it more is tries to provoke like a role play response rather than actual like violence. So they'll try to do it in a way in which the other characters can like respond to it before it happens, essentially.
So in this scenario, if I was like, "Yo, I'm going to tie slip knots," and I'm like, "Hey, all I know how to tie are slip knots, and you just let me tie this entire rope, guys."
Yeah, that would be a situation that one of my players might be like, "Hey guys, all I know how to do is slip knots," and then they're like, "Who's got the best rope use?" And that player goes, "I do," and then that totally something that my player group would do.
That's funny. I like that. And you're right. It allows for a situation that encourages role play, not PvP violence, because that would get my ass killed. I like that a lot. I like that. Cool. So it sounds like the cavern and the magma tubes, the lava tubes, were fun. Did they get to where they were going? They solved the issue, or did you guys get to the end of the night and kind of pause in a dangerous, precarious situation?
Yeah, where we paused. Yeah, we paused with the 3-group split. And so we're gonna hop into it next session. So I might try to play around. And do you ever do this in person? I sometimes used to do it where you take someone into another room to talk them through a situation, or do you do those one-on-one stuff just openly at the table?
So, interestingly enough, I used to take them in a different room. If it's immediate, I would still do so. However, I think that we talked about I initiated the folder system, and each folder has a manila envelope. And so now we can communicate via note card and envelope. So they get personal information, personal communications back and forth, pertinent information that they may only know, extra details that they may have found out. So none of it has to be done at the table out loud.
So if you have a situation where one person is completely split away from the party, doing something that's critical to what the party is doing, you handle that with note cards?
Yeah. So what I would actually do is say, I will fill you in on what happens via the note cards, and we're going to play as everything works out from that point. So I use that opportunity to fill in a lot of detail, but I don't reveal anything too much that would give away the game, because focusing on one player for too long creates a lull for everybody. And stepping away from the table gives everybody an opportunity to kind of break their immersion enough where it can be hard to rein it all back in. So I cover that private moment after game by some degree, or I give them just enough information that they can kind of piece it together, and then we successfully continue on, and I fill in the rest of those details afterwards.
Interesting.
So it's allowed me to be able to keep the game moving forward as a collective story, and kind of give them all the details of what's been happening when their characters are on their own. Still getting information that they're looking for and needing, but I try not to make it to the point where one person goes out and about really far out, like a scouting mission, and brings back this wealth of information. If they do something like that, I will say that they go out, they're successful, they come back. I will give all the pertinent information that the entire party needs to know, and I'll tell them if there's anything extra, it'll be in their folder.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I've kind of gone back and forth about doing, like, since we mainly play online with this group. When I did play in person, I would sometimes like bring people away to have like one-on-one chats in another room.
Yeah.
I've gone back and forth with this with my online group. We do have a secret side chats, which is another voice channel that we hop to. But I've also done a few times where everyone can hear. I think this one I'm trying to decide if I want to do a side chat, because sometimes I feel like it can, especially in suspenseful or like dangerous situations, I think having that split chat can lend some like urgency and some pressure, that knowing everything that's happening at the other on the other side of things doesn't give
Absolutely. I can definitely agree with that, and I like it. there actually may be instances coming up in one of my second party, my contingency hero group, that I may have to do my normal method with, and with my Twisted Justice group, I may have to go into more of a direct route because of some of the classes that two of my new players have taken. So, kind of interested and excited about that. We'll see how it goes.
I am a little nervous about the whole having focus on one player too much. That does just worry me a little bit, just being online, but I feel like being online there's enough distractions on the regular that maybe they're staying busy.
Absolutely. Or if you know what you're going to provide them, you can type it up first and just zip it to them in a private message and be like, yo, check your private messages. That way you don't have to break that conversation between the entire party. They have it. They can read it while they're right there. And they can be like, I get it. And when a player slows down something, you can still interact with everybody else.
Yeah,
So
that's probably a good idea. Probably prep. I might actually even message the lone player, get their kind of general course of action. So,
yeah, that's what I've done. In fact, I've got two players that are looking for some information, and the information that they're looking for and the location that they're currently in actually has some pertinent information. So instead of going through their pertinent information while everybody's at the table, I've sent it to them off the table. They've gotten it in our downtime between games. So I'm like, hey, here's a PDF of what you get. It's written in their perspective if they need it. The story is told to them from the perspective of the individual that they're talking to. And that information actually ends up going into their player folders. So, yeah, I do what I can. Like, I was just asked earlier this week how invested I am when it comes to time and my games. Like, is it just at the table? I'm like, no, I'm 100%. Like, people can reach out to me 100% of the time, and I'm ready to talk about this. Just go. So it's kind of what I do. I like to do that, and I provide that much time and energy for my players. So I have a good time.
I do tend to think of, or view it as a mark of success, as if the players are discussing something in between weeks, like in our Discord or in our forms of communication. And so there has been a decent amount of chatter after this last week's session, so I'm excited about that. How'd your session go?
Man, so I am really excited because I run two groups in Animar. So two groups in the same world, which is really providing some amazing world building, character designing shortcuts for me. One of my players, for example, has run from he's a rat folk who had left his warren, and he told me to develop the NPCs. So I was like, you know what? He's got a really fat rat friend who's a chef. Like, he loves to cook. His name is Trudge McCormick. He's a rat folk chef.
All right.
I used Trudge McCormick from one Saturday game in my last Saturday game. I'm like, you know what? I already have a rat folk chef. I don't need to make a funny chef. This guy is famous enough where they brought him in. Like, cool. For a slug eating contest during the Royal Tournament during the Fall Harvest Festival. And I was like working off the cuff a little bit. I'm like, what else can I really pull? Because I want some elements of some danger here. Like, the fun and games that are going to go on have to be prevalent, but I need to instill danger. So I pulled a bad guy that I developed from my other Saturday game as well, Serena Barlown, Queen of the Red Court. And I have her developed enough as both an NPC and stat sheet developed enough where she's got essentially mythic dimension door. So when she pops up and she interrupts the entire opening ceremony, we know she's bad. Like, she interrupts the queen and everything. And the queen responds with reiterating the rules of God, what are they? I forgot, the name just slipped me, but pretty much your rules of hosting and entertaining Fae. Like there are etiquette, there's a very specific etiquette to follow when you are a guest in the realm of Fae. Alludes to some information about how one of the characters is. The way the Red Court Queen popped up, they determined that she was a vampire. Threw in a werewolf there for good fucking measure, because they hate each other in an event where violence would be met with execution, because you are disobeying the laws of hospitality. That's it. The rules of hospitality. So yeah, and I threw in a murder in there for good measure.
Always exciting.
Yes, and I remembered a specific small plot point that my players forgot about that I brought back because it was a perfect opportunity to do so. They were supposed to, at some point, if they felt okay to do so, sneak into the castle, retrieve some paperwork, and bring it back to the guy who asked for it. Well, the queen, during the fall harvest tournament festival, stays in essentially a small castle-style palisade built on the grounds. Rules are you cannot come and go. Once you are locked in as a participant, you get to stay there. I mean, everything's well taken care of, but they don't want cheaters. So you can't leave and come back with loaded dice or souped-up horses, etc.
Did your players recognize that was a plot point from the past?
They forgot about it.
Well,
but I brought
bringing it back up again. Did any of them have that?
Yes, they all remember. They're like, "Holy shit, yes!" And now is an absolute amazing time to do it because the palace is like empty. And I was like, "Uh-huh."
Sorry, I misinterpreted. I thought that because they hadn't done it, you were having actions happen related to it.
No. I laid down a little bit of the groundwork earlier about, hey, you should go get these paperwork. But if you can't, it's not a huge deal right now. I'm just pretty sure that they exist. Everybody decided that they didn't have the skill set, opportunity, or time to do so right now. Didn't even put it on their back burner for future goals. And then when an opportunity came up, the gentleman who asked for those paperworks was like, with what's going on right now, you might have an opportunity to go do that. Which technically sidetracks. I got to tell you way more. I'm super excited.
No, it's always good to bring back and remind the players of a quest.
Yes, and the information that they got, and how easily they were like, yeah, sure, let's go do that, versus the wait a second, why are you bringing it up again right now? In the game, they had to go up and fight against a Black Knight. They haven't done that yet. They're trying to get all the information. Right now, they have the information on the Black Knight, and they have information on who the Black Knight is. The Black Knight is the land-owning squire of, one of my players' bad guys in her backstory, Sir Lucas. So I've had it set up where the Black Knight makes an appearance in the jousting portion of the tournament. He comes up in round 1 under the name of the squire. His name squire is Adam. In the Black Knight armor, kills the centaur jouster, by the way. And he does so by having a sharpened lance underneath the pommel, or the fist, or I forgot what the end of the lance is. And that breaks, stabs him, kills him. But hey, it's a centaur. You can't knock him off the horse anyways. It's a cheater, right? But aside from that point there, that shuts everything down. The centaur was a part of the noble guard, who is a step up from the constables, who are the regular guards for the town. So he's part of the Queen's specific guard inside the military district, but still friends with the constables. History and lore that the players hadn't known until the game were that a constable, the bar owner that they've been getting a lot of information from, And a recent NPC that they met were part of the Consortium, which is a vigilante group that sort of disbanded many years ago. Warren, one of the vigilantes, became a constable, so he constantly has the access to the police and information to feed to the Consortium. Eric became the bar owner, so he's constantly always getting rumors and shit to look for, look into, etc., to feed back to the Consortium. So they have information sources. The party didn't know that they were vigilantes, so when they made the appearance as vigilantes, they were like, oh shit, we're totally surprised. I was so excited after game, I had to show them, yo, this has been in the works since the beginning. And they were like, damn, we believed it, but damn. Eric, the bar owner, the vigilante bar owner, is the one who told him, I need you guys to go into the castle and get some paperwork for me. Makes an appearance after the murder because the constable who was at the games wanting to participate wanted to kill the guy who apparently did the murder. Like the name, the armor, worked out. But when they get there, the guy is bound in rope, tied up, and they use smelling salts to get him to wake up. So they're like, he couldn't have done it. He's been tied up. Are we looking at this all wrong? Well, when the vigilantes get there, it's like, hey, we're going to stop him from killing this guy. And this is a perfect time for you to get those papers I asked for. You know, vigilantes sending them away. And they're like, oh yeah, you know what? Good idea. Let's do it. So there can be fallout from that now as well. And they come back.
Are you setting
yeah.
up the vigilantes as a posed adventuring group essentially to the party, or an enemy, or more of just another force in town?
A little bit of a force in town. They'll be able to determine what they want to utilize the vigilante group known as the Consortium for, now that they know that they are vigilantes. Since the two members had taken full-time civilian jobs, they hadn't been able to take to full suit and regalia and just go out and vigilante work. One of them maintained the public face by being a recluse in a tower in the middle of the market district. But allowing them to work with or against depending on the relationship that they develop now that they have the information. Because while they're not bad guys, they're not good guys either.
They're just other adventurers, essentially.
Essentially. So yeah, and the Queen of the Red Court also came from my contingency hero group. That came from the bad guy consortium cluster known as the Quell. I was like, pull this out. She's kind of making a few appearances right now. And it leads in, and we're so crunched on time. I think I want to push it a little farther if you're okay with this.
Sure.
Because we wanted to talk about one of the most difficult aspects of, I think, DMing, and that is NPC to NPC conversations or scenes. And so often conversations between two NPCs gets watered down to the conversation was about this. And you just give your players the topic in general. You don't usually want to have an entire conversation between two NPCs. You're talking to yourself, that gets boring. But when I had my two NPCs in the session, the Queen of the Red Court and the Queen of Yonbridge, the Queen of Vasal's Kingdom, I went through about 3 sentences from each of them before the conversation was done. Just enough to drive point and story and plot, which is how I've handled that particular instant. I have an idea. I want to fly by, but I'd like to hear how you handle those NPC to NPC interactions.
I typically, I try to change up my voice between different NPCs, and using being on camera or in person. I also try to physically change where I am and my body language as I'm changing between NPCs. Although I do think it can be a weak point or a difficult thing to do. I've seen it done in some cool ways between games, and there's also some ways I'd like to try out.
What is the way you want to try out?
Well, I've seen, was it the West End D6 Star Wars game the way that one typically has it is you try to structure your game into acts, and each act will start with a little excerpt. And sometimes it's the scrolling screen that Star Wars starts with, but then once you get into Act 2 and 3, it's usually, like those bad guy scenes. And it usually has them written up, or you have them written up, and then the players will, you hand it out, and the players will take turns and read those scenes out themselves.
Oh, that's neat. That's neat. I like that.
It's in kind of a similar vein. I read this webcomic called Up to 4 Players.
Okay.
Which is it's all about their game system, but they use it. Oftentimes they'll have a comic section, and then down below they'll talk about both the rules interactions that are happening and GM thoughts. Kind of, it's interesting. But at one point, he does talk about giving players, they have an NPC situation where he gave the players kind of the 4 characters, and each one acted out. And basically they did a role-playing scene where these 4 players had kind of these bullet points that they wanted to try to get to, and then it kind of played out as it played out.
I like that. I might use something I might present an option like that to my players now that 2 have left and I've gained 2 new ones. Because go for it.
I think it's tough. Obviously it can be pulled off in a webcomic because you literally control everything that everyone can say, sort of thing.
Right.
But I think it's a good idea, and especially if you're all in on letting your players drive the plot and contributing and adding elements. I think it's a great way to get the players looped in also on kind of what the bad guys are doing or where they might be.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I like the not as involved version where essentially they get kind of a script that they can read at the table. I think that's neat. One of the things that I'm going to try is recording the conversations in different voices that I can play for them at the table. So that way I can have the ambiance of their overhearing a conversation, and then I can have them make checks and certain responses based on how those checks go, etc., just by making sure certain DCs are high or low enough. And then keeping it between 5 to 8 minutes at the longest, just quick conversations, and then end it with something like, I think somebody's listening. And then we jump back into actual play.
Would you record both sides of the conversation, or would you record one side and then actively have yourself speak out one side?
So I have been working in audio programs to see if I could get my voice to sound like a different voice well enough to match the character ideas that I have in my head. Whereas I can get a lot of the male voices down, or some of the younger children. Female voices are a little bit more difficult. Regardless of how I get them, they can sound, I don't want to say feminine because it sounds like a digital pitch alteration, because it is. I might Fiverr up some of them and kind of have them saved on reserve for larger important plot points.
Fiverr?
Which I can Fiverr.
What's that?
Fiverr is the online website where you can hire people to do stuff for dirt cheap.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So have them record for me for this, which is a non-commercial use, it keeps it pretty inexpensive for me. But then I can take that audio file and send it to my player group in between games. Be like, hey, this is the conversation you guys overheard.
Ooh.
Yeah. That's what I want to do. And before my 2 party members had left and the 2 new ones had stepped in, that's kind of what they had all agreed to do. Well, they agreed to give it a try. But with the 2 new members, I'm thinking I need to take another vote because it might shift the numbers one way or another. I didn't have a full party yes. I didn't have a full party no the first time the vote came around. I I think it was a swing of 2 could have changed it in a different direction.
What are they voting for? Like
if they want me to go audio recording,
okay.
or if they're okay with doing like a table read of the NPC lines.
Oh yeah.
So I think
both
that's
would work. Yeah.
Same, and I think they're all fantastic ways to handle NPC to NPC interactions. It's one of the hardest things as a DM for us to do. So I mean, in general, how do you keep them engaged? I really hate saying you overhear the idea of the conversation. This is the essence of what you heard. This is the important bits of what you've collected. You understand this name, this location needs to happen. Like it's fun, but it shortcuts the depth of the game, in my opinion.
I think it could also be worth bringing in every once in a while when I know that there's going to be an NPC that is going to have a lot of conversation or a lot of talk with me. Sometimes I will bring in random guest players to play that NPC. I've done that before.
I like that too. One of my new players wanted to come in and just sort of see if he meshed with the party. So he was going to sit down, hang out. I'm like, hey, that's kind of boring. Why don't I give you an NPC? You know, here's his personality, here's his information. He's like, yeah, I'll do that for sure. We'll see how it works. He ended up having his character done. I guess he had like, you know what? I'm probably just going to design and sit down and stay anyhow. And by the end of the game, he was like, I'm glad I chose the route I did. So I was going to do something very similar. I would love to bring in extra people to do NPCs, but I'd want them to be theatric. Like I want to find a way to step it up again. Like I'm comfortable with the level I'm at now. I want to step it up again. So that is the goal.
Have you ever seen or heard the situations where someone, like a party, will have a guest GM that only handles like rules? Or because you could also have a situation like that where that side GM, the rules GM, could handle all the party related NPCs that are like the regulars that stay with a party. You know, the bard that follows, the random torchbearer.
No, that's interesting. I haven't heard of anything like that.
Just have a whole group of GMs. One
That would
GM
be
for every
interesting.
player.
How nuts would that be? Like everybody would have their own liaison to the game.
Everyone has a Yoda clinging to their back.
Right? That is nuts. Man, because I really enjoyed how I've worked this game out. I looked back in our camera and I can see I got my TV back there. Dude, I put my map on the TV. I've made trading cards for all the character NPCs. I put them on the TV so they can all see who they're interacting with. And anytime something happens, I can just go right to that person. Like, this is who you're interacting with. This is the conversation that's going down. So they have a visual of who it is.
Ooh, that's good. I like that. I've also heard of GMs. Well, I mean, without a TV, but like putting them on top of their GM screen.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good idea.
It's a whole lot more printing for me to do that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That is an advantage. And I guess on some of my virtual tabletops, you can pop up different things to players. So that might be an avenue I could approach as well. When a certain player, when a certain person is talking, pop up their picture.
Yeah, it's really neat. I really enjoyed it. All of my players really loved it, except for the one in the corner. They're like, hey, if we can move your TV. And I think he said it jokingly. I said, say no more, my friend. I will do just that. And I've literally rearranged my entire office to make it as comfortable as possible for my players to sit at the table. Like, I've moved shelves. I've rerouted electric. I have everything.
I feel like if you're rerouting electric, you might as well just make like an elaborate system of mirrors.
Then I have to get rid of certain shelves, and that holds my other stuff.
It's,
like
it's elaborate. Hang it from walls, ceilings.
It'd be like a fun house at the end.
Yeah.
As much as I enjoy that, I'm pretty sure I've got some players who would think that's a little nauseating. But all right, so we've pushed about 10 minutes over because I've gotten overly excited.
Oh my god, that's illegal.
Oh, you know what? I hope everybody loves it. for any sort of closing words, I've been missing it, man. Guys, check us out on Facebook. It's not super active. I know we're primarily posting for side quests. Same thing with our Facebook group, but eventually, I've been saying this for weeks, eventually I will have a blog post up. I've got 3 of them in the draft mode. I don't know how I want to publish those.
Yeah, share us with your friends. Make new friends. Share with them.
Yes. Guys, share our stuff. We're entertaining.
Touch grass.
I love it. That sounds weird. Good night, guys.
Okay, new intro. We've changed the name, and we're still using the word paladin. Paladin. I mean, it hasn't been used in the English language in about 200 years, but okay.